Welcome to Caring.
Welcome to Caring Well.
Welcome to Caring Well.
Welcome to Caring Well.
Caring Well. Welcome to Caring Well.
Welcome to Caring Well.
Welcome to Caring Well, a Middleton Pediatrics podcast where we have conversations to help you care well for your child. Today we have a conversation with Cami Slater. She's a former middle school counselor and now a private practice therapist here in town. And we're going to talk about how to help your child have a great middle school experience. So let's go to that conversation now. Cami Slater, thank you so much for joining us at Caring Well.
Thanks for having
really,
me.
Yeah, really excited about our conversation and just be able to talk about how to help a kid thrive in middle school.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get there, would love for you to share a little bit about your professional path, like kind of what you've done in the past and what you're doing currently.
I got my degree in counseling, my master's and specialist degree in counseling at the University of Florida. And I was right out of school after my practicum and internship. I was a middle school counselor for 2 years over there. And I just love middle schoolers. My husband says that he used to think that I was like being sarcastic when I
Right.
said that.
You don't hear that a lot.
Yeah,
so
but
understand.
I wasn't. I really do love them. And it was a really special time. And then I had my son. He is now almost 3. I stayed home with him for a couple years. I taught at University of Central Florida as an adjunct professor in their counseling department for a year. And then I still plan to do that here and there. And now I'm in private practice doing mental health counseling and play therapy with kids, teens, young adults, and parents.
As far as currently, the
Yes.
age that you work with is what to what generally?
Well, I do play therapy for 3 to 12-year-olds, and then sort of as they're in middle school, transitioning to, high school, I would do more regular counseling with them and still including expressive arts, but I still work with, teens and even young adults in college. I have a lot of experience I have taught, at UCF, but then I taught when I was at the University of Florida as well. So I have some experience with young adults as well.
In terms of school counselor, that term's probably used a little generally.
Yeah.
And I imagine there's many types of school counselors. So
Yeah.
help listeners understand a little bit about the path, the educational and training path to
Right.
that. And then what are the various roles that a school counselor plays, either by design or by necessity?
For education, you have to have a master's degree in counseling, and then you have to get a certificate. If you have to take your teacher education exams. There's like a professional exam and then the school counseling exam. So those are key points. And within the master's program, you do a practicum and an internship, and then you take all your, mental health and school counseling classes. And then what you do is a lot of things. You wear a lot of hats, but you do it's a lot different, I think, than what used to be considered a guidance counselor, because a school counselor really plays a big role in social, emotional well-being of kids. So you're doing classroom lessons to teach like the whole group those certain things. You're running groups for specific needs that kids might have. I often did self-esteem groups, especially for girls, and then friendship and like peer relationship groups for like 6th grade boys was a big one. And then individual counseling, like crisis counseling is a big piece. So noticing, getting a referral from a teacher, this kid said XYZ. So figuring that piece out and then referring to the appropriate outside therapy services, which is, what I've transitioned into the private practice work. And so that's where those types of referrals would come into play. And then still seeing kids weekly on a weekly basis, just a lot shorter than what you would do for long-term therapy, shorter amount of sessions and shorter amount of time.
How would you describe the difference between a school counselor like you
Yeah,
were and a
yeah.
therapist like you are?
A school counselor is really seeing so many kids and trying to do a preventative line of work and then that crisis work and then referring kids out.
Almost, we would call that like triage.
Yeah,
right?
triage. Yes, absolutely. That's a great way to describe it. A school counselor is like triage, and then the therapist is going to do the longer term work to see the child like on a weekly basis for maybe 6 months, a year, however long it takes to just have that deeper work that's done that it can't be done in a school in 25 minutes and, part of your math class, and then just for those concerns that can't be addressed with just a couple of chats with, this counselor that has 650
In an
students.
ideal sense, are
Yeah.
those people working in conjunction? And I'm sure
Yeah.
there's, you know, release of information that
Oh,
you'd have
yeah,
to,
yeah,
yeah.
HIPAA and all that. Yeah, so when we can, I think it's so important to be able to talk to the school counselor and the therapist to talk to each other as a school counselor. I thought that was really important when we had those release of information to talk, because then I could see what they were working on in therapy, and I could see what maybe some things I needed to be aware of to help them at school. And then on the therapy side of it, I would love to know the problems that they're seeing in school so that we can work on them on my side, and have a team with the parent and the counselor. So the school, the parent, and me are all on a team to help this kid.
If you were articulating, what is it that's unique about middle school? How would you describe that?
There are several things, but I think that the identity formation piece, where they're just trying to come into like they're asking, who am I? Who do I want to be?
Kind of for the first time, you're
Yeah,
saying?
for
Yeah.
the first time. And their hormones are shifting too. So there's like this moodiness piece, and there's this like um these peer relationships that are coming into play that are very different than elementary school. Like, they aren't just friends with the people in their class. Now there's this whole new dynamic here of social hierarchies, and what people think about them, and they're noticing all those things. And like even the sexual piece coming in, like with the puberty and how that shapes their identity and their relationships with other people. It's a wild, wild ride.
How does whatever that seeking identity, who am I, how
Mhm.
does that play out in terms of a middle schooler's feelings, thoughts, entering
Yeah.
sixth grade?
Gosh, I think they don't really know what hits them. They don't realize that they're gonna start feeling that way, and so it's just very different for them, and before they felt like things were easy,
Right?
and then
Comfortable, maybe?
comfortable, yeah, all of a sudden things are hard, and that it's that egocentrism that comes in, and they're like, "No one gets this. No one understands what I'm going through." And oftentimes they don't have a great connection with their parents, or they feel like I can talk to or like, they can talk to them and have those conversations, which is such a really important part for them. But yeah.
I think that is such a great way. Who am I?
Mhm.
One of the things we'll say in the office sometimes is similarly, they're also asking, am I okay?
Mhm.
So, and again,
Is this
they're not saying
normal?
any of this,
Yeah,
but
right.
what they're feeling is a little bit of who am I now?
Mhm.
And am I okay? Do
Right.
people think I'm okay?
Yeah.
Type of thing. And it developmentally, from a pediatrician's point of
Mhm.
view, and you know this in some ways much better than I do, but it is sort of you are leaving one world and entering a new world,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
that's physically,
Right.
but you're saying it's also relationally and even
Mhm.
sort of psychologically identity type stuff.
Right.
Yeah, I mean we're making the point. It's an upheaval.
Yeah, and I think people think of it as just a transition to high school, but it's not. It's its own unique experience in itself, and it should be treated as such, not just oh, this is a stepping stone or this is a transition. No, this is the time where they're going through all of these biological, psychological changes that are impacting every aspect of their life.
So what would all right, so go back to that time as a
Yeah.
middle school counselor. What are if that's a little bit of what's going on sort of under the hood or in
Yeah.
the psyche, what were the common issues you were seeing as a
Oh
middle school
gosh.
counselor?
Well, like I said, that identity piece where they were like, I don't even know who I am. Like, what do I want to be? Um,
So insecurity?
Insecurity, yeah, self-esteem issues. I think too with when males go through puberty sooner, they become more popular than the ones who go through later. And then females, if they go through earlier, they're less popular. And so that played a role in their self-esteem too. The popularity piece coming in and them seeing that, and not like the bullying and the ways that the social hierarchy plays out is like really
It's
hard.
based on some weird values, the
Weird.
social
Yeah.
hierarchy. Yeah, I mean,
And
whether it's
social media. Ugh.
yeah, and that's a whole
Yeah.
new dynamic.
Yep.
As a school counselor, if you're meeting with a child, there's obviously going to be issues raised that are sensitive,
Right.
concerning. I mean, by definition, that's what you're
Yeah.
doing often. And so, how do you balance respecting that
Mhm.
child's privacy, uh, informing parents if
Right.
appropriate? What are what guidance
Yeah.
do you have in that?
I would talk to kids and parents before starting, usually kids, because if they came in to me in a crisis state, I'm talking to them before talking to parents. I would tell them, hey, look, anything you say in here, I'm going to keep it, between us as much as I can. But if you tell me you're going to hurt yourself, you're hurting someone else, or someone's hurting you, other people are going to have to know about it. And there's a couple of things that can be told, academically and stuff like that to, your administrators and things like that. And so they know that if they're sharing something that's hurting them, someone's hurting them, or they're hurting someone else, I'm going to talk to their parent. And if there are really big things that don't necessarily fall under that breaking confidentiality thing with parents, and I feel like their parent needs to know, if it's a safe parent, especially, I tell them, hey, look, I think that either, you should tell your parent about this, or I can, or we can do it together. And a lot of times, they'd be like, oh, you can tell them. I'll sit here while you talk to them on the phone.
Hmm.
I don't want to tell them. And I was like, great, thanks.
Hmm.
I don't mind though,
Right.
really. As long as the parent was getting to know. So they were, usually okay with it. And I would say sometimes there are laws in place, like in Florida, there are certain laws, about what parents, know. So it is walking a line again, there, which is different than in therapy, which is really that there are less, things that you have to worry about because it's just the parent.
Friendships.
Yeah.
How would you coach either a child or a parent in terms of if you could say something to them and they would listen and hear it,
Yeah.
what would you say to them about how friendships are about to change and how to navigate that?
Yeah. I think I would start with talking to the parent about it and about how to develop even that relationship with their child to where they could have that conversation and they might listen. So just like really giving them opportunities to be heard, and they're going to think that these friendship issues are such a big deal, and you want to validate that, yeah, these are a really big deal to you, and let me, come alongside you in it. Tell me more about why this person hurt your feelings or what you could do in the future. So keeping that in mind for parents even before talking to their child. And then I think talking to their child about, yes, things are changing, and having little talks along the way. People's bodies are changing, their hormones are changing, and this changes how you relate to someone. And here is my experience, and really digging deep into yourself and knowing yourself and what happened for you, and being honest with your child in an age appropriate way. Because I think that's really where the connection happens, not like trying trying to say something and being awkward and not knowing what you're doing, trying to read something off of a script. This is what I should say, but hey, this is what it was like for me. What are you hearing other kids talk about, or what maybe are you worried about? And
Do you think, and you don't know, and I don't know, but
yeah,
if you were guessing,
yeah,
to go back to
okay.
how many of those kids do you think got any of those talks?
Oh gosh. Ooh, less than half.
Yeah, it feels like that may be generous.
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe like 30%.
yeah. Um,
I don't know if that's even generous. I
right,
maybe
right.
maybe
It
that's too
does.
generous. I
It
don't know.
I mean, we have older kids,
Mhm.
and with some of whether it's puberty or whatever,
Mhm.
talking about
Mhm.
sex or
Mhm.
it you don't you don't necessarily get a very receptive audience.
Right.
It's not like they're saying, "Oh, that's interesting,
Great. I
Dad.
love
Tell me
talking this
more."
about
Right.
you, Dad,
It's
or talking
almost
with
this
this.
squirming. How
Yeah.
quickly can I get out of here?
Yeah, yeah.
And so some of it maybe I wonder. It feels like it takes a pretty intentional parent to even initiate the conversation, and then a pretty confident one to proceed with a visibly unreceptive audience. Um, if you were just offering some tips to parents, I mean, you already did somewhat as far as just, I love what you said about share your own experience, that there's a relatability that, hey, I've been there too. Anything else you would say tips to parents?
Yeah, I would have a couple. I think some parents choose to have a big talk type thing. I do have a close friend who has middle schoolers, and they do a great job with it. The parent of the same gender takes them on a little trip, and they do a really fun trip. They have talks where the child asks lots of questions. They do it when they're before entering into middle school.
So like between
Yeah,
fifth and sixth grade.
between fifth and sixth grade. It has gone really well. She has 3 kids. I look up to her a lot, and they've done a really great job. And a lot of times, though, those big talks don't necessarily work. She does a great job with it, and her husband does a great job with it. But I think little talks along the way can be really good. Like something comes up at school, they do a health thing in 4th grade, whatever it is. And then you start having those conversations. Hey, you learned about this in school. I want to be the person that answers those questions. I know it's probably really awkward to have these questions with your mom or your dad or whoever it is, the guardian, but it's not awkward for me. And even if it feels a little bit, I really want to be that person for you. And I'm not judging you. I'm not, just really having that space where they feel like, okay, I can ask even if it's hard. And if they don't want to, just saying, look, I'm still going to share a couple things with you. I know it feels like you really don't want to hear it, but you've got to hear it because you're either going to hear it from me or you're going to hear it from someone else.
I wonder if there's ways that you've seen, because one of the things you alluded to a little while ago that I
Yeah.
think is so true is that there is a developmental transition towards desiring independence.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Right.
you're walking a little bit of a tightrope of, I want to
Mm-hmm.
respect this desire for independence, and yet I want to be present to instruct
Right.
because I am still parenting.
Yep.
So how do parents walk that line? How do
Yeah.
you, maybe be easier to say, what are ways it goes sideways? What would be
Yeah.
ways that you would be trying to instruct in a way that wasn't effective,
Mm-hmm.
or if you were giving too much autonomy?
I think when you're walking the line and you become maybe too involved or making too many decisions for the child, would look like really answering all the questions for them at doctor's visits or just doing too many things for them and being so involved that you have to do your homework at this time or you have to get you're really talking for them. You're really telling them exactly when they need to do things and micromanaging, really. And that's becomes a problem because they don't develop resilience and grit and like things that they need, skills that they need. And they're just kind of like, I can't do any of this by myself. My mom does it for me, and that's becomes a problem because they're not developing that independence. And then they either like people please or they rebel, and then the other side of it, giving them so much independence and not, being that guide that they need would be a problem too, because then they end up doing so much, risky behaviors and things that they don't even have someone that's saying, hey, this isn't going to be safe for you. And I want to love and care for you. And in that way, I'm going to tell you, hey, like, this isn't the right path for you because you're going to really hurt yourself. And here's how. Some of these have consequences, and then like with homework, they're going to potentially fail if you're not going to guide them some, but there is a line and it is hard to walk. Push the limits to a point where it's still a safe fail, right? And if you don't learn to do it now, you're going to learn to do it later and they're going to be much more catastrophic. If, you're not turning in a paper in school, it's a bad grade. If you're not turning in something at work, it could be getting fired. And so they have to develop those things now in middle school so that they have practice at it and they know what it looks like. Oh, I didn't turn in these papers, so I got an F. If I want to pass to the next grade and go with all my friends, I better pass. They start to learn and realize it's so much more effective, those natural consequences, than it would be if the parent was like, you're going to be grounded for 5 days if you don't do your homework. because I don't want you to get an F.
Right.
You know,
Controlling the results to
right.
avoid the consequences. So you said something else that as far as the way you dialogue
Mm-hmm.
with kids,
Yeah.
that probably too is needing to shift a little bit from instructive to more dialogue.
Yes, and asking questions, how do you think that you could have handled that better? Or this person, it sounds like this person really hurt you. What could they have done differently that would have been better? Or, oh gosh, you got an F on this. How might you do something differently in the future so that you can pass and go on to the next grade with your friends? Really asking those questions so that they have that time of critical thinking and independence to choose, oh, wait, this is my idea. Like, I need to do this because I want it. It's just so much that those open ended questions are going to really caring too. Like, gosh, I do care that you failed. Like, that really does stink. And you can't go on this, to this baseball thing or whatever because you failed. And I want to help you do better next time. So let's talk about it and see.
If middle school is a little bit of a different world,
Yes.
it has a different language.
Yes. Yes.
How do you learn, even if you're not trying to speak the language, how do you even understand? How do you
Yeah.
know what they're saying terminologically? That's
Yeah,
probably not a
it's
word
a
either,
great
but
question. I used to know all the things when I was in the school for the 2 years that I was in this middle school that I was at, and I knew all the terms, and I could understand what they were saying just because I was around them
just by
so
hanging
much.
out, you weren't
Oh, no,
studying
I
some
asked them.
website or what?
No,
Okay.
I asked.
You
I
asked
would
them, what does
ask.
that
Someone
mean?
would say something, and I would whisper to another kid, "Hey,
Okay.
I'm so old. I don't know what this means. Can you tell me what this means?"
Okay.
And they would explain it to me. So I asked. I think just asking, "Oh my gosh, I'm so old." Like really playing into this, like, "I'm old. I'm dumb. I don't know what you're saying. Can you tell me, like what does this mean when you say that? I want to understand." And they will likely tell you, and they'll think that you're,
I think they want to tell
they
you. So what
do.
we
They
found
want
with
you
our
to
own kids,
know.
if I say, I'm not sure what that means, help me understand what
Yeah,
that
yeah.
means, they love
They think it's
kind of
cool.
being in the know. I
Mm-hmm.
think if I were to make fun of their
Right. We
language,
don't. Yeah.
then
Yeah.
that doesn't uh, keep the conversation going.
Right.
But I would say, hey,
They
help me
also
out.
love when you try to use it and then you do it wrong
Love
because,
correcting you
yeah,
then.
they love correcting
Hmm.
you.
Any tips on this? Gets really practical.
Absolutely.
Helping a child and or a parent
Yeah.
embark on a new academic world,
Yeah.
getting ready for that. And so part of it is letting consequences happen and
Right.
letting them fail.
Right.
But what about more of a prep?
I worked at the Disability Resource Center at the University of Florida with students that had several range of disabilities, including like ADHD and stuff. And I felt like I got a lot of practice there teaching skills, which I then took over into middle school when I was a middle school counselor. So some of the big organizational skills that I taught them were, color coding things, actually having a planner, whether it be if it's on technology, fine, and they put in all their assignment due dates. So their teachers are going to give them like, I don't know if it's called a syllabus, but an outline of the what's due for that unit. They're going to need to put it down on paper, on a calendar, on a, you know, electronic calendar. Color coding them by subject is really helpful in a binder or a notebook and on their paper calendar. And that way they're looking, okay, I have a project due in 2 weeks. Maybe I need to start it, next week and coaching them on what that looks like. This project's really big. It looks like it's going to take you a lot longer than these little projects because they don't know how long it's going to take them. They need someone to coach alongside them.
Yeah, they've never
And
done this.
yeah, so that's another thing of being present and connected and really looking at their stuff and helping them figure that piece out. Hey, you're going to have to figure out when you're going to do this because this is going to probably, it looks like to me, this is going to probably take you like 3 hours. So you might want to break it up. You get to figure that out. You get to decide, but, giving them that independence there, but, really helping them map it out, really helping them stay organized with each class by, color or something like that. And then helping them decide, figure out when to do what tasks. Like this is a big thing and breaking it up. They can do like I think it's called the Pomodoro method, 25 minutes of working and then a 5-minute break, teaching
So
them
even
stuff like
using
that.
timers?
Yep.
Yeah.
Using a timer is great. Things like that are really, really helpful.
I feel like, again, in the office, and some of this is in retrospect with our own kids,
Mm-hmm.
focus a lot less on the lighting the fire under them
Mm-hmm.
and more on helping instill some new habits.
Yes.
I feel like there's almost this, don't you know this counts?
Yeah.
Don't you know this,
This is a grade.
yeah,
Yeah.
quit that and
Yeah.
just quit the motivational speeches and really
It's
just
yeah.
focus on habits.
The process.
Huh.
Yeah. The habits, the process are so much more important because those are the skills they need
You're
to
equipping them.
Yeah, you're equipping them and you're not just trying to force them to get something turned in for a grade because really it's less about the grade and it's more about them like developing these habits, developing a new way of doing things to be successful in life too, in a job, and all of those things are really important. You have to have a calendar to stay organized. You have to learn how to
Right.
meet deadlines, and they're all important things that you have to learn for life.
Friendships.
Yeah.
The dynamic definitely changes. There's a little
Mhm.
more almost sectioning off into groups.
Yep.
And I think most people looking back and even going through it would say middle school is often lonelier
Mhm.
than elementary and probably even
Yes.
than high school.
Yes.
So speak to that a little bit as far as maybe some of that is just helping people anticipate the normalization of that.
The feeling lonely.
Yeah, but then also maybe how to navigate that so it isn't lonelier than it should be.
I think it becomes lonely because it's that sense of belonging that they're desiring. And then everyone's feeling so awkward. Everyone's trying to figure out who they are and trying to fit in, and they're noticing that other people are noticing them. And I think that's where the loneliness comes in because they're just not sure where they fit in. And I think a way to help them with that loneliness, obviously, that what I've been talking about, what we've been talking about, is that connection with their parent so that they feel like they can talk about it. But then the parent helping them, hey, let's get you involved in this club or this thing that you like. And so maybe there'll be people there that you connect with that are like you, and helping them notice, you know, people that are kind, like really noticing who's going to be a good friend. How do you notice those qualities? Well, that just doesn't come necessarily innately to a middle schooler to notice who's going to be a kind friend. You're going to have to help them figure that piece out. And I think that little bit of coaching there goes a long way to helping them develop like a good friend group.
Would you go so far as to tell a parent to force some involvement in some of these organizations?
I would say, yeah.
Yeah.
They have, I mean, otherwise what are they going to do? Sit on their phone or
Right.
sit and twiddle their thumbs, play video games?
By
I don't know. By
themselves.
themselves. Like
Right.
that causes a whole nother mental health crisis
Yeah.
if they're like COVID did and things like that when they were so alone. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like if you jump into some club organization or
Mhm.
something, and if you leave with one friend,
It's a win.
wow, huge win.
Huge win.
Even if you don't do that club
And
anymore.
you don't like it, fine.
Right.
Find a new club or,
Right.
Whatever. But you made a friend and that's a win.
One of the things we'll say that to try to help people navigate it, I mean, this is a conversation really with kids, is
Yeah.
this idea that you don't necessarily need a lot of friends,
Right.
but you do need a friend.
Yes.
And it can be one or it can be one or two.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you could learn, and I know this isn't easy, I'm talking to a kid, learn to maybe be friendly to everybody, but don't try to be friends with everybody.
Yes.
And giving them the freedom to
Yeah.
keep your distance from
Yeah. I don't
so-and-so.
have to be friends with everybody. I
Right.
just have to have a couple of friends that I trust, that are nice people, that we get along. And yeah.
I heard somebody talk about it's called the approval prophecy. I think
Mm.
it's the idea is that if I said to you, there was these experiments where they said, Cami, I know someone who I really think you're going to connect with based on some things you've said, da, 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 da. I think y'all would be really good friends.
Yeah.
The weird thing about the experiment was they made it up. There was nothing that predicted connection, but they told people this and they were much more likely to try to
Yeah.
engage with the
Right.
person. And so it was a self-fulfilling thing.
Yeah.
And
So a parent can do that.
yeah, I mean, I wonder if utilizing that as a parent, because this
Yeah.
wasn't talking about parenting. This was more talking about older individuals.
Uh-huh.
And if it feels a little dishonest, but to
Yeah.
say to them, hey, you know that kid over there? I really think y'all would be great friends.
Yeah.
because it apparently works.
Yeah, well, I mean, a parent can do more than that. They can kind of get to know other parents and figure out, oh, maybe these are some students that might be able to be friends with my child by being involved in some sort of club or whatever. They can kind of feel it out, and then they can again coach their child and say, if these are some red flags for you to notice in friendships. If they're doing, if they're talking about you online, if they're really being mean or talking about you to another person, like this isn't someone you want to be friends with. You want to be notice someone who's friends with everyone and doing some of that coaching too. And that way they can see too who are nice people.
Let's shift to social media and technology.
Mm,
And so there's so many different ways to approach this, meaning it can be, how do you coach the child?
mm-hmm.
How do you coach the parent? What do we as a society need to do? Um, So go wherever you want with that. It
Yeah.
obviously, or maybe I shouldn't say obviously, it seems to be playing a big role
Huge.
in mental health and
Yes.
of our children.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what are we to do about it?
Yeah, well, I will speak to the fact that it is playing a huge role. I think every day when I was at the public middle school that I was at, it was a K through 8 school, but my middle schoolers were dealing with bullying online, someone sharing a nude photo online, another kid saying they wanted to kill themselves online, like really scary things happening online when middle schoolers are on social media. And it really, really does impact their mental health. And we, as people who are involved with middle schoolers, teachers see it, counselors see it, pediatricians see it, I know. And I have a strong opinion that middle
Okay.
schoolers should not be on social media
Okay.
and should not have phones with internet access. And I love the book, The Anxious Generation. And I think the author gives some great tips about when to sort of release them into this world of, he calls it Mars. So, would you send your kid to Mars if you didn't know what the effects were going to be? And if you weren't there with them? And if, people were saying, XYZ about Mars? Anyway, it's a whole thing. But
We actually are going to do a future podcast, like
yeah,
book club, on that book.
oof,
Yeah, it's
so good.
so good.
It's, yes, as a parent, it freaks me out. As a counselor, it freaks me out. But it's so good and it's so important. I would say, yeah, I really think that it's just a dangerous world when they get on there, because even if parents think that they're watching what their kids are doing, think that they're monitoring it, they're not. Kids have fake profiles. They can get out of apps. They can hide apps on their smartphones. There are crazy things that happen. Parents don't know that it's happening. Even the most well-meaning, most involved, in a positive way parent, they just don't know. And so when you don't allow them to have a phone with internet access that has the ability to get on the internet, they're not going to be doing it in your house. They're not going to be doing it at school, really, because they're not really allowed to have their phones out much. They're going to probably be on other people's social media at their houses, or maybe they'll even make a social media account at their house, but it's not happening 24/7 for them.
If they said, well, then my child's going to be the only one,
Yeah.
any response?
It's actually not true.
Yeah.
There are a lot of families who've made the decision to not have their child on social media. Their kid is going to be mad. This is true, especially if the parent is on social media a lot. So that's a key thing. You have to decide as a parent, are you going to get off social media to be a good, role model for your kid? You have to make some of those decisions. But yeah, parents are worried about that piece. And I think having conversations of like, this gradual release into this world is really important. Like, hey, you're going to have a phone. You can call your friends, you can text your friends, and when you get into high school, you can have social media, have a smartphone, and we're going to have to talk about those boundaries there too and how to keep you safe, because my job as a parent is to keep you safe. That's one of my top
Yeah,
roles, and so
it is. So anything, and maybe that's the highest yield. What about
yeah.
any coaching of the child themselves?
Yeah, yeah. I think really talking to them about I would talk to students all the time that the stuff they put out there is you don't know who it's going to reach or and how long it's going to be out there, because it could be out there forever. And especially talked to students about like nude photos being out there. I'm like, your teacher could see that. The law enforcement is definitely going to have to see it if it gets somewhere. The whole school could see it, things like that. And then also a mean comment that you say about someone, it's going to get back to them and you're going to hurt them. And here's how it affects them. And I think it's really important to not lecture them about it, though. I feel like when you have a good relationship with a child, it needs to come from that person. Hopefully they have a great relationship with their parent, but hopefully they can hear it from someone else too. And I think I had a great relationship with my students to where they did respect and trust what I was saying. And I think that did help.
That speaks to the benefit of school
Oh
counselors
yeah.
or other caring adults.
Yeah, their teachers and things like that. So I think really talking to them about how, that it's out there forever, how it can harm them and our other people, just whether it's words or photos or whatever it is. And it's just, and who's going to see it? Could be everyone. So you got to think about it.
One of the concepts we'll try to talk about in coaching, again, it's just a hard transition for parents to learn that
Yeah.
parenting adolescents is different than parenting
Yeah.
elementary kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that parents are always told that.
Right.
And so there's a transition that's happening. Anyway, one of the things we say is you have to start doing a lot more parenting indirectly.
Mm-hmm.
If a kid is trying to exert some appropriate age
Mm-hmm.
appropriate independence and you come at them, you're actually provoking them.
Right.
And
Yeah,
you
you're
are
poking the bear.
you are eliciting a
Mhm.
defensive response. And so, but if
Absolutely.
I can come indirectly, and that can be through coaches,
Mhm.
youth groups, school counselors, lots of
Yes.
different things. I learned years later that my mom had gone to people older and had
Oh
said,
yeah.
"Hey, would you?" I had no idea. I just thought these spontaneous
Mhm.
relationships with old,
Yeah, yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
and I don't,
Smart mom.
yeah, it
Mhm.
was. And anyway, this idea of maybe trying to encourage some more indirect
Yeah, or their
parenting.
favorite teacher, or
Mm.
their coach, a youth director, youth leader, all could be really great people. That indirect is really
Yeah,
important.
while we're on it, I mean, would you say anything, if you could wave a magic wand societally and try
Yeah.
to, how should we as a society be approaching technology, social media as it
Mm.
relates to the health of our teens?
Oh gosh, getting off it for more, like just not spending so much time on it. Because as parents, if we're spending a lot of time on social media, our kids are not getting that attention that and connection that they really do crave. Even though middle schoolers crave so much autonomy and independence, they also crave that connection and the attention, and they want to know that their parent their parent sees them and their parent values them and thinks that they're cool and tries to be interested in what they're interested in. And if the parent is on their device too much, they're not able to really connect. I know even my son, who's really little, he'll tell me if I'm on my phone or my computer, Mommy, I want you to close that. I want you to get off that. I want you to play with me. And if you think about it, what a middle schooler is going to say is going to be really different, but it's in essence the same thing. They want your attention.
Yeah, and they may just withdraw, or
Yeah.
they may act out
Right.
actually to get
Yes,
attention.
rebel
Yeah.
to get attention or even withdrawing to be just on their device, one of the two. And so I think modeling that as a parent is really important. And then really not allowing young kids to be on those devices because they're just not developed enough to know how to, their prefrontal cortex is just not developed enough to know how to not say things right off the bat or do inappropriate things because they don't think about the consequences, and developmentally that's appropriate.
That's right. That's right.
So
So are you? I guess you're a fan of things like what Orange County has done with getting it out of schools,
yes.
and yeah,
Yes.
it feels like if our game plan, and we felt this even as a parent, if the game plan is I'm expecting this adolescent to go against the current and
Mm.
make these great decisions, and that's a pretty bad plan.
Yeah.
There's got to be something, at least some part of systems that are also
Mhm.
contributing to the solution, and
Right.
school has been one. I know Jonathan Haidt speaks
Mhm.
strongly about that too.
Yeah.
Um, Okay. Bullying. Anything you want to say about bullying
Oh,
specifically?
it's just very different now than I think yeah,
Pre-internet stuff. Yeah.
pre-internet as parents, what they
Because
would have.
bullying's not new, obviously.
No,
Right.
no, but it was so visible, I think, before, visible to teachers, visible to parents, and now it's 24/7. It follows them home on social media
Yeah.
and
Kid
on their
can't get away
phone.
from it
Yeah,
like once you used to
nowhere
could.
safe. Before their house was safe, and now their house isn't safe, and that's really a sad thing, and a really hard thing, and that, I think, is why mental health has one of the reasons why mental health struggles have exploded is because you can't ever escape this really difficult bullying experience that you're having, and people aren't noticing it necessarily until maybe a kid says, "Hey, Mrs. So and so, Mr. So and so, someone is feeling really sad because this person is saying something about them online." And sometimes kids do that. And kids would tell me all the time, "Oh, miss, I have tea for you." And I'm like, "Great." That meant that they had something to tell me, that was, I'm like, "Sure, you can tell me, as long as you know that if I know I'm going to do something about it." They're like, "Yeah, yeah, this person's really sad." And
So these are kids that were coming to you
mhm,
about something happening to a friend.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, or even not a friend. They're
I
like,
mean, just
"Hey, I
another
don't really like this
classmate.
person, but they've been really sad lately, and I'm kind of worried about them because so and so's been picking on them online, and they have a whole social media page making fun of them." And yeah, and that's
I wonder if there's a way to, as a parent,
mm,
teach my child what they need to speak up about. Like,
mhm,
I don't expect you to tell me everything.
yeah,
I know you have your world, and I want to respect that, whatever
right,
conversation that looks like. But there are some things that I want you to feel free and appropriate to tell me.
yes.
Uh, any thoughts on how to equip a child to know when they really should
Yeah,
report something?
I think if they notice that someone has changed a lot, like they're really sad all the time, then maybe that's a time where they should tell an adult. Or if they're getting picked on social media and a lot of people are doing it and they think, I'm noticing changes in this person. I think I should tell an adult. Those are things that are really important. Or if they notice serious signs like cutting on their friend's arm, or if a friend says, "Yeah, I don't want to be here anymore." Those really serious things because they lead to that person could lead to that person not being there anymore. And so those are hard conversations to have with your kid because you don't want to necessarily expose them to lots of things, but unfortunately they are exposed to wild and crazy things worse than the worst imaginable online.
Yeah,
And
it does feel like
so
as parents, I think sometimes when you say it, you realize how foolish it is. But it's almost like if I don't talk about it, it doesn't exist, and
right.
yet it is existing in their
Yeah.
world. And so
Someone else is gonna tell them
that's
about
right.
it. Mhm.
Someone else is beating down the door trying to tell them stuff that,
Right.
and so basically be first in line to do
Mhm.
that. If there were only a couple conversations that a parent could have with a child that was maybe again at the front end of middle school, what would
Mm.
be, these are the most important things I'd want you to remember? What would those
Yeah.
be?
The number one thing is having a conversation with, "You can tell me anything. I wanna hear it. Nothing's off limits," and then really mean it when you say that.
And there's an
Don't yeah.
implication there. You're not going to get in trouble if
Right.
you tell me that. Yeah.
Where you're gonna get in much less trouble.
Hmm.
There might be a consequence, an actual consequence from it, but I'm not gonna be extremely mad at you. I'm not gonna think less than you. I'm not gonna judge you. We're gonna figure it out together. I'm gonna be on your team if you tell me these things. And that would be my number one conversation to have. Maybe number two, talking about the social media and the changes in peer relationships and things that can happen with bullying and things like that, having like setting up those boundaries and talking to them about what the relationships might look like, things like that. Having that type of conversation is really important.
Hmm. On that first one, I've heard, I don't know if you're familiar with Lisa Damore, and
Yeah.
yeah, I'd heard her say something about how uh, kids at this age can be so loyal to their
Mm.
friends
Mhm.
that they are not going to readily tell you stuff
Right.
negative about their friends. And
Right.
one of the tricks that she did was she would say, "Why don't you don't use any names.
Mm-hmm.
Just tell me the scenario, and you don't have to tell me who it is at all. And the kids were much more likely to share the details.
Yeah.
And then if it reached a point of, okay, this is a really big deal, then maybe you can say, you don't have to tell me, but I do want to say as a grown up, this is more serious than typical stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important, but it's just a way to
I
get
love
kids
that.
to talk. But
Mhm.
if you say, if they feel like they're throwing their friend under the bus, it's
Mhm.
kind of a non-starter.
Right, because their peer relationships at this time are most important to them, and their opinions matter to them more than their parent, which is again that strange shift that's happening. But yes, I love that idea. I think that's super.
Any particular books that you would recommend, either for kids or maybe more likely for parents?
Yeah, I don't know about for kids necessarily, but for parents, the anxious generation, which already mentioned, how to talk, or was it how to listen so kids will talk, how to talk so kids will listen, or the teen version. There's both are great. Seen is another book. Probably haven't heard of it, by Will Hutcherson. It's a friend, someone that I met when I lived in Fort Myers, who does a lot of speaking and work with parents and middle schoolers and mental health and the intersection. He's a pastor, so that's a really cool book. I think I had another one that I had thought of. Oh, Brainstorm by Dan Siegel. So
Okay.
Dan Siegel has a lot of great stuff on the neuroscience and the interaction between mental health and the brain and things like that. He's the one, he does a lot with like flipping your lid and how the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain talk, but that's his book toward teens. So
Brainstorm.
for
Okay.
parents and teens, and all of those I think give great insight and help you how to navigate your child in this changing world.
One superpower you would love for every middle schooler to have.
Confidence.
Mm.
I would love for them to just try things and to not be completely shattered by the comments that do come, and that their self-esteem wouldn't be shattered when someone says something to them, which it so often is. I just want them to know their worth and their value, and that they're going to get through, and know that they're going to get through it, and just have the confidence to go day by day.
Do you find, uh, in your experience, anything about school that is structurally um, favoring, this is broad brush, but
Okay.
girls and not as much for boys? This is talked about some, and
Yeah.
that a lot of the behavioral problems, a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
boys are frustrated. You have some insight, some
Yeah,
experience.
I definitely think that's the case. And in when a teacher is expecting a classroom full of middle school boys and girls to sit and be still and quiet, the ones that are going to sit and be still and
A
quiet
little more
are
likely.
likely to be the girls in the class. And the boys are going to have a lot more energy that they need to, blow off. And it's a lot harder for them to sit there and be still. And there's been a lot more success I've seen with teachers that allow them to not have to sit at their desk necessarily, and to not be silent, but be quiet, so that they maybe can talk to their friend as long as they're getting their work done, or they can bounce on a ball while they're listening, or have like some sort of fidget with their feet and things like that. Or those kids that are more successful had maybe gym right before that class.
Yeah. So,
So,
Cami, are you making a case for recess
oh,
and PE? Yeah.
yes. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think more physical involvement. I know there are some kids that really hate PE, but maybe the expressive art for them is better. And so having the art be part of their day. Yeah, I think those things are really necessary for them to break up the, you know, routine of trying to sit there and learn from a teacher standing at the front of the room.
Anything else that you would love to see change in middle school structure?
Yeah, I mean, I would love for there to be more like social emotional learning taking place, and like success skills. And some schools will do that. We'll do a class. At my school, they started to do that. Which
You're
was
speaking
great.
almost to a life skill,
Yeah.
emotional intelligence,
Because yeah, and
not
like
just academic stuff.
right, because they need those things to be successful academically. And some parents are like, "Oh, I'm going to teach them that. I don't want
Hmm.
that to be taught in school." But it's like it's not necessarily enough to just come from the parent. Even if you are teaching it, things like how to be successful are really important in middle school with
Mm.
the organizational skill piece even. And I had 650 middle schoolers per one school
Wow.
counselor.
That feels a
So,
little spread out.
yeah. So I think a really big piece to help attend to the children's mental health and middle schoolers' mental health is having more
Of you.
counselors in the
So
school.
is
Yeah.
that that was all they had funding wise,
That's
or
just
is just not
unfortunately normal is to
okay.
have about like 400 to 600 plus students per counselor.
Were you just doing, not just because
Yeah.
obviously that was a lot, uh uh emotional, mental, or was it
No,
also
no, no,
academic coaching
no.
and stuff?
Yeah, unfortunately,
Guidance
there was,
counselor.
the piece of the guidance counselor. I loved the academic piece of helping, coaching academically, students. I didn't love that I often had to do transcripts and figure out their classes and schedules. That took so much of my time too, and duties. They would put me in the lunchroom to watch the students, which my students loved because they would be like, "Oh, come sit at the table with me," which I loved that piece. But having to be there for an hour and a half every day. I mean, the school day is not that long. And having those extra pieces, having 650 students, it feels so daunting, like a big cloud over your head because there are so many kids that wanted help and they wanted to talk and, so many parents that needed things and it was impossible to
Yeah,
do.
that you're speaking to something that feels like an investment
Yeah.
that is not going to show maybe immediate
Mhm.
metric. Maybe,
Right.
it may take a while to show the benefit. It takes some faith to
Mhm.
make that investment.
Yeah.
And maybe there's places doing it. I don't know. Maybe there's places that through grants or something
Yeah.
else that have
And
more
and
counselors.
and a lot of like OCPS has mental health counselors that do come in the school and see the kids a couple days a week, but it's just so different than a school counselor who's there every day being involved with these kids that they know and
What
trust.
about the chill program? Do you know
Yeah,
anything
the
about
chill
that?
program is
Okay.
great. And so
Okay.
that is a great program that brings in mental health counselors into the school and it does give some of those students the one-on-one. But they do need more school counselors that are there all the time and accessible for on the spot counseling because the chill program does more therapy and like short-term therapy, which is great, and that's what the mental health counselors coming in with OCPS do as well, but there need to be people there that are available
So that's
for the
almost
kids.
more when there's more problems, and you're
Yeah, like
saying something a little more upstream,
yeah,
relationally connected to
mhm,
kids, and
and the crisis piece is big too.
of
We had a
course.
lot I mean, unfortunately, suicide assessment, risk assessment, sometimes I would have 3 in a week. Sometimes I would go for a week with none, which was a huge win, but regularly, we were doing that, and that was really hard. For parents, really hard for parents, as much as it was hard for the kid and for me and the teacher, whoever was involved in it. It's really hard for the parents.
Maybe as a way of kind of wrapping this up,
Yeah,
what would you say is a what does a beautiful middle school experience look like? And
yeah,
then maybe that could be a way to sort of work backwards as far as how to get to that.
yeah,
If you could paint a picture of a great
yeah.
middle school experience, what might that look like?
Oh, I think it would look like having a great group of friends that were kind and caring, having a balance at home with you know, being with family, being with friends, being involved in something they'd enjoy, and having teachers that they connect with. Just really important, those peer relationship connections and the adult connections, the parent and the teachers. But yeah, that it would be that those connections would help them be able to foster that identity development and all those other things that come along with middle school, but they would have those connections. I think that that is the underlying most important thing.
Yeah, so that you really almost are bringing this, you're highlighting this idea that the relational, and going back to the
Mhm,
first thing you
mhm.
said about really entering a new world and
Yeah,
kind of leaving one, entering a new one when you feel maybe alone and not
mhm,
comfortable, just having someone else there with you, and more
mhm.
than just one other person. Some of those, some adults, a good friend, a parent who's present.
Yep.
That a lot of the problems that we've talked about, probably if they had a root cause, that some of it's a relational detachment.
Yep.
Or relational loneliness.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's hit some rapid fire questions
Okay.
here. Okay, you just got to
Okay.
tell me first thing that comes
Okay.
to your mind. Tea or coffee,
Coffee,
cat or dog,
dog,
mountain or beach,
mountain.
best restaurant in Orlando according to Cami Slater.
Oh, the Strand.
Oh, that's
Mm.
great. Love the Strand. Better movie to get ready for middle school, Inside Out or Mean Girls?
Mean Girls.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Would you say your athletic skills resemble more Kelly Slater, greatest surfer of all time, or AC Slater, greatest wrestler in the history of Bayside High?
AC Slater, because I'm wrestling my toddler
Oh,
all
there
the
you go.
time.
You're getting experience better than
Yeah.
surfing. If you could be a middle school counselor anywhere in the world, where would you want it to be? Just what part of the world would you love to go spend a year or two?
Oh, spend a year or two? Greece. I've never been there and I'd love to go.
Interesting.
Not even sure if they have school
Yeah,
counselors over
they
there.
could start a program there, right?
Maybe.
They need them.
Yeah.
What if they? Yeah, that's great. Hey, we are glad that you're here in Orlando,
Thank you.
doing what you do. You and I, even before we started the interview, talked about the need for more of you, and we feel that every day in the office, and just appreciate people that have committed their professional lives to caring for kids and caring well. So thank you.
Thank you.